Welcome to Hope for Our Times, and I'm here with Britt Gillette. We're going to get into digital rationing and things that you need to be aware of before the end of this year. Things are coming. Right now, what it is, it's the 1st of August, early August, and things are happening fast. And we keep hearing these warnings. And so we're going to get into this. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Sure.
We're going to roll, but first of all, how can people connect with you?
Oh, the best way to find me is at brittgillette.substack.com. That's where I put out all my videos, all of my articles. I've got a free PDF there, 7 Signs of the End Times, that people can download. They can hand it out to their friends and relatives that maybe don't understand some of the things that we see. And so that's a good witnessing tool for people to have. But brittgillette.substack.com.
Great, and it is fabulous. You'll be blessed. All right, Britt, I was in Singapore. A lot of people know that. I've talked about it recently. Just a few weeks ago, there were different people in meetings that I was privileged to be a part of that are definitely, these guys were definitely in the know. And they're talking about digital things coming. They're talking about how far advanced Asia is regarding in comparison with the West. And also they even talked about the Gulf states. They talked about the money that's going to be pouring into the Gulf states too. By the way, the guys I was talking to were saying, no, that's going to be where all the trillions of dollars are going, into that region. So I found it very fascinating, but they really were talking about what is happening with digital everything, ID, currency, tokenization. What's coming?
Well, what's coming is a 3-part digital system that the powers that be, for lack of a better word, want to set up, and have been telling us this for years. So the 3 parts are digital ID, so who are you? Okay. We need some sort of biometric marker for who you are. Digital currency, whether that's stable coin or central bank digital currency, some sort of digital currency that can be surveilled and tracked, programmed against you. And then tokenized assets, which is taking all of the assets in the world and putting those on the blockchain, making those digital as well so they can be surveilled and also programmed through the use of what they call smart contracts. So you might say, well, yeah, this asset, Tom said some things on social media we don't like, so programmed into this, if his score is low enough, he can't buy it. Or maybe he can't sell what he already has. Things of that nature. So this is a very, it's a terrible system, really, and it's indistinguishable in capability and function from the Mark of the Beast system we read about in Revelation 13. It isn't the Mark of the Beast system. We'll see that during the tribulation you've pointed out in the past. That requires the beast, right? We don't have a beast yet. We're not in that time period yet. But we would expect when that happens, it won't be constructed in the middle of the tribulation and instantly. There will be some sort of structure set up, and I believe we're seeing those foundations, that infrastructure, being put together right now. And so those are the 3 elements of what we're seeing, and I think one of those is going to roll out here fairly pretty soon. And we've been seeing aspects of it for years now, and that's digital ID. I mean, if anybody's traveled in an airport recently, you'll note that they don't just want to see your driver's license, they want to scan your face, take pictures of it, scan every aspect of your body. So they're collecting this information already. I think 14 different states already have digital ID set up here in the United States. Depending on various places, I believe earlier in the year, they set up a program where, certain foreigners entering the country and staying longer than a certain amount of time had to give over some of their DNA or maybe even their social media passwords. And people say, yeah, we need to make sure that terrorists aren't coming in. Okay, are you fine with when you leave the United States and go to Europe, they do that to you? Well, no.
Right.
And so as they roll these things out, it becomes more and more like a police state. And given the crisis we're in energy-wise, I think that's going to be the crisis that's used for a global push for digital ID.
So when I think of people's willingness to go digital, there's going to be some resistance.
Sure.
There was H.G. Wells who looked forward to a time of this global government. He wanted a global system. He wanted a leader at the top. He may have not called him Antichrist, but everything he talked about is a system where everybody's entered into, everybody's data is collected. You can't do anything without an identification. This is 100 years ago he was writing about this, and he was quite happy about it. And then he said, this is very interesting, however, there will be a lot of people that will die resisting this system that is coming. So it's been around for a long time, that thought process, but we're rapidly approaching there. Where I see a problem is the willingness of people, but again, talking with some of the people in Singapore, just doing Bible prophecy, you can see where crises creates a willingness of people to say, I'll give up whatever. You know, we talked a little bit about that before. I'll give up my freedoms, I'll give up this. And do you think it's going to be a crisis that will cause people to, I don't see how else they could really push us to that point of saying, sign us up.
Right. Yeah, I believe that's exactly what's coming, and we've seen it here in the recent past. So I know back during COVID, my wife and I, following the rollout of the medical intervention, right? They said, well, depending on where you live, you may have to show proof of that. And we said, talking about these passports, can you believe this? And we went to family dinner and said that. And instantly, two of our family members went, I've got mine right here. And they had a laminated proof on hand. And I thought, there wasn't even a connection of this is a threat to freedom and liberty. There was just immediate, really, compliance with that. And so I think what we're going to see, we've seen, if I wanted to set up digital ID, the steps I would take to do that, if I wanted to institute a great reset, the steps I would take are indistinguishable from what we've seen so far this year. So first, I would realize the economy globally runs off of fossil fuels. Crude oil and liquefied natural gas and piped natural gas. That's what the majority of the energy supply that drives the global economy. So I would start a war in the Middle East and disrupt that. Close the Strait of Hormuz. We've seen that. We've seen now the closure of the Bab el-Mandab Strait. So Saudi Arabia was able to reroute 5 million barrels a day at its apex from what used to go through the Strait of Hormuz to the Red Sea and get that out. That's now been closed off. We've also seen, amazing coincidence, in March we saw Ukraine ramping up attacks on Russian oil export facilities and production facilities, refineries. To the point where they took out 40% of Russia's crude oil exports. And now Russia, which produced 11% of the world's diesel, has now become a net importer of diesel and gasoline.
Okay, I don't want to sidetrack you.
Sure.
But I'm gonna for a second.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at gas stations. See gas prices, see diesel prices. Diesel prices are outrageous. And I remember back in the 1970s that people were told, hey, buy a diesel vehicle. I remember Volkswagen had a diesel vehicle. Everybody's coming out with them because diesel's always going to be less than gasoline. And now I'm looking at this going, this is pretty outrageous. And does that have something to do with it, or is there something more devious in this? Because when I look at diesel prices, that will drive up the cost of everything, because all of our goods by trucks, everything. I don't care if it's phones that are being delivered to an Apple store, or if you have groceries, dog food that's being delivered to your grocery store.
Right.
You know, it's going to drive up the cost of everything.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because of this, Russia is part of the problem, or it's actually planned?
It's all of it. So we often hear here in the United States, we're energy independent, we're able to export all these things to the world. It's simply not true. If you look up, if you count all the energy that's created, yes, we net export a little bit more than what it is, but not all of that energy is the same. So they're counting propane and butane along with crude oil.
Okay.
And not all crude oil is the same either. So what makes diesel tends to be heavy sour, which tends to come from the Middle East. We create light sweet crude here in our oil fields for the most part. So that's what we have an abundance of, what we tend to export. And then we import heavy sour from Canada, from other places.
So heavy sour is needed for
diesel.
For diesel,
Yeah.
okay.
And so that's responsible for making those prices go up.
Okay.
And then we see, again, Russia was the number 2 oil exporter behind Saudi Arabia in the world. So we had the number 1
Wow.
exporter of crude oil shut off. Now we have, essentially, for all intents and purposes, Russia shut off as well. And so this leads to scarcity throughout the world. We've been eating through these reserves. So again, we've had this long drawn out conflict that we haven't hit that wall yet because we're able to draw down on reserves. So here in the United States, we've been drawing down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's now at levels we haven't seen since 1983. And we're about to hit the rock bottom of those levels. There's still 300 million barrels of oil in that. But what people don't realize is we don't store these in metal tanks. We store them in salt caverns. And so as the oil is extracted, water's put in, and if we take out too much, we risk collapsing the caverns and then they become unusable. You can't refill them again. And so we're approaching that point where we'll no longer be able to tap those reserves. Same thing's happening around the world. And so we're about to hit a point where the world realizes there is not enough of these essential fuels, because you mentioned, well, look at all these things diesel's used for, like agriculture, our food. Our food cannot be harvested without diesel. If you have no diesel, the world cannot be fed. And the food, once it's harvested, can't be trucked to grocery stores and restaurants and all these other places. So this is a big problem. And I believe that's why rationing is coming, because if you take 15 million barrels a day off of the global market, you can survive for a little while off of these reserves, the same way as if you lost your job, you might have some savings set aside. Well, if you continue to live the same lifestyle, eventually that savings goes away, and then you're forced to not be able to spend. You don't have that option. Same way, we're going to be forced to not use this oil, the gasoline, the diesel, the jet fuel, all of these things. And so they'll come out and they'll say, well, we have to have rationing. Don't worry, it's not a threat to freedom and liberty. We've had this during World War II. But you know what? Back during World War II, we gave people these ration cards. And if we gave people that now, they would be so easy to counterfeit. Everybody has all these home printers. So what we're going to have to do is to make sure nobody counterfeits. We're going to scan your eyeballs. We're going to scan your face. We're going to take your fingerprints. We're going to take some sort of biometric marker that's linked to the ID and the app on your phone, and you'll get an allotment, a ration of so much diesel or gasoline every month or every week or whatever they do. And they'll roll this out, and just as we saw during the pandemic, the overwhelming majority of people will say, I need it, I'll comply. And they'll go ahead and do that.
It's for our good.
It's for our good. Yeah, it's to make sure that these other people don't get more than their fair share, right?
So, yes, indeed. So, interesting. Again, talking with these guys in Singapore, it's very interesting. These guys were all believers too, by the way. And when they were talking about ruling out these things, they said it's going to be sold, which we've talked about before. It's going to be for your good. It'll be, hey, look at all the sex traffickers we're going to be able to eliminate, because we can track everything. We'll get rid of illegal drugs, all of this. And they're going, but you realize what that really is. It's really a trap. And I couldn't help but think of it with the sex trafficking. If they really cared about whoever they are, that's behind some of these things, which I'm going to be interested in your thoughts on that too. If they really cared about sex trafficking, well, why hasn't anybody from Epstein's list been arrested on either side? So I'm thinking, don't tell us you care when the proof is you really don't. There's something else going on here. So when you look at it appears there's a master plan behind this. We know God's on the throne, but I look at it and I think, okay, Satan's got his minions that work here on this planet. But you go, it's somebody's in control of these things. There's got to be some people at the top. I'm guessing people that aren't really in the public sphere. They must be behind the scenes doing something, pulling strings,
Sure.
calling shots, because it doesn't make any sense unless it's intentional.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't stop no matter who's in office or who does
yeah.
what. So, mentioned before, going through the airport, and they'll take a picture of your face now, and they say, "Oh, we don't save it."
Okay.
And I thought, well, then what good is taking the picture? You're matching
Yeah.
it with something.
Well, yeah,
Like
so,
what-
so I could prove they save it. So we were coming back in. When you're traveling internationally, you got to go through immigration when you get to the U.S. I'm walking through the line, and they said, "Welcome home, Tom Hughes." Before I never showed my passport. I never even went up to a machine to have my face scanned. And so I was one of 300 or whatever people were on the plane. How did they know?
Right.
Right. So they saved it. They've got all that information. It was, it was Gus. I think his name was Gus Hunt. He was head of CIA's cybersecurity for a number of years, and he was asked a question about data. Why do we have so many data centers? This is way back when it was only Utah and a few others. And he said, well, we plan to store everybody's information. How long do you want to keep it? We plan to keep it forever. Right. Well, what for? And that's data centers have become a lot more prevalent lately.
Yeah. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, there were 6 senators, bipartisan, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. Ted Cruz was one of the Republicans. Elizabeth Warren was one of the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And they said, TSA should not be doing this. This creates, in effect, a global surveillance network, a global digital ID. And they pushed against it. They pushed their colleagues to push against it. To my knowledge, nobody's voted on it in the Senate, yet we still have it, and it still rolls out more and more and further. So there has to be some sort of plan here that's pushing all of this. And as I noted, if I wanted to start a great reset, if I wanted to roll this out, the exact things that I would do are exactly what we've seen so far in the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, in terms of cutting off this energy, destroying using up all of our oil reserves globally, and getting us to a point where we hit rock bottom, including, I would argue, the Trump administration has been manipulating crude oil prices downward. And people look at this and go, well, look, oil's only $80 a barrel. It was only $60 before the war. What's the big deal? But you look at what they call the crack spread, which is the margin that a refiner makes when they refine crude oil into diesel and gasoline and jet fuel. That's at all-time highs. So from a diesel standpoint, we're looking at the equivalent of $150 a barrel right now. There are no strategic diesel reserves, so they can't cover that up by emptying a reserve. Mm-hmm. Once they can't cover it up anymore, we're going to see prices go vertical. There's just no way around it. And in the past, we've avoided a lot of these financial crises because the problem, if we look back at the banking crisis in 2023, when we had the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th largest bank failures in U.S. history, they were able to paper over that crisis by guaranteeing all the deposits in the bank, by saying, we can print as many dollars as we need to. Your cash is safe. You do not have to worry about this. When the problem is not lack of dollars, but it's lack of oil, central banks can't print oil.
Print that, yeah.
An executive order from the president can't create more oil. It can't create more liquefied natural gas. They can't conjure these things into existence from nothing. And that means the physical world will assert itself and reality will come to the forefront very quickly, sometime in the very near future. I mean, we're talking anywhere from weeks to months, and some places around the world it's already happened, depending on where you live. So that's where the whole world is headed. Is the United States better off than a lot of other nations because of the energy we produce here? Yes. In a place like Canada, very, very energy resource intensive relative to their population. But that's sort of like the equivalent of saying, hey, we were engaged in a battle and we both lost our arms, Tom. But the other guy, they lost both arms and both legs, right? So we're better off than they are. Like, that doesn't make me feel real good that I got hit worse, not as bad as everybody else.
Not as bad.
Right?
So as we see this, how much time do you project until we hit this place where the reserves for what we're using for gas is just not available anymore?
I can't see us getting past September, really, without that happening.
We're in August.
Right, we're in August, and I think here in the United States, we're more likely to see elevated prices than shortages. And the reason for that is the president can, by executive order, stop exports and say, stop exporting all this excess. And we would have enough for most of the United States. The problem is California has almost a totally different energy system than the rest of the United States. So California refines around 20% of their product in the state. The rest is shipped in from other places like South Korea.
Thanks to our governor.
China, Singapore, all these other places in Asia where they get their crude oil from the Middle East. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities to the supply chain in
That could get
in California.
That could get the governor in California to finally comply with the federal government, and maybe
So we may
change a
see
few
a lot
things.
of things change in terms of what they accept once the pressure is applied. Oh, now we're going to have the same standards as the rest of the country, but even then, it's going to create a lot of problems. So I'd expect at least much higher prices in California, if not rolling shortages of product.
Not that they aren't already higher.
Yeah.
So that's coming when we think of digital rationing and tokenization. As we work this out, so we start with digital rationing. Digital ID is connected with that because you can't do the rationing unless. I would think also you look at a social credit system, which China's developed. China actually is quite good at it, from what I understand. So it was Klaus Schwab who said several years ago, what China does is what we need to do. And that is really what this is coming, but it'll be on steroids compared to what China's done in the past.
Right. Yeah, and I would expect they would roll this out probably by the end of the year. We're going to see a global push for digital ID, and we've been seeing it leading up to this as well through a series of countries have been pushing this idea of, well, we need age verification for the internet to protect the children, right? So as you mentioned before, we need to protect against these illegal activities. We need to make sure we protect the children. So they say we need to verify the identity of these children. Nobody under the age of 13 or 16 should be on the internet unfiltered. And people go, yeah, that's right. And thought, well, that's what parents are for, right? That's what parents should be doing. But most people, when they hear that, they think, yes, that's a good idea, and it doesn't occur to them, well, that means everyone has to verify who they are before they can log on to the internet. Because if you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, you have to prove you're not 12.
Yeah.
And how do you do that apart from a biometric scan, a facial scan, some means to prove that the person logging in is not a child? And so it's backdoor digital ID for the whole world. Anybody that wants to use the internet anyway.
Do you think there's anybody that does not currently have their data captured and saved? Anybody?
There might be maybe a few homeless people,
but even
in third world countries, but outside of that, no, I'd say like 98% of the global population is tracked.
I would say even with homeless people, that when they were born, there were certain things that were entered into the hospital records, or whatever, when they went to a doctor's appointment when they're 5 years old. I mean, there's certain things that are still there, including fingerprints. Your eyes aren't going to change.
Right.
You know, these types of things. So my guess is with AI, this is only going to get more and more difficult to hide from the system, no matter who you are. Again, if you're in the middle of a third world country somewhere where literally there's no electricity, that type of thing, maybe. But overall, you are in a system. And okay, so we have digital tracking, digital ID coming, and everything that you said about rolling out by the end of this year is what I heard when I was in Singapore. It's coming. And then we have where it's going to escalate to a point of Revelation chapter 13 where no one can buy or sell. Now, we've had this conversation before. Don't want to freak people out. All kinds of people predict the rapture is going to happen. We're at Rosh Hashanah again, I guess 9/11, so there it is, another sign, right? These types of predictions, Ezekiel 38 is going to happen tomorrow and so forth, but they're not. These things can't happen now, and we're still a ways away when I look at it from my perspective, all of the technology that's been developed, and it's here, but trying to get systems to work together and people that are in charge of some of the systems to work together is still a big hurdle, along with governments. Doesn't Putin want to be in charge? Doesn't Xi Jinping or Trump or wherever you look across the world, who wants to be the one that's down the food chain?
Sure.
So to me, there's still time that's necessary in order to get people on board that are in leadership positions now, even with the technology, all these billionaires that are running the tech industry, whether it be Sam Altman or what's his name from Google or whoever. We're not there. We don't have a beast system yet, but everything is. I think all the technology is here. Does that sound right?
Yeah, the technology's here. It just hasn't been widely adopted universally by everybody on the planet yet, but that's where we're headed. Again, digital ID, we see that rolling out. We see digital currencies rolling out to a large degree, and as you mentioned, the rapture could happen at any moment, but these other things take time to be put in place, and we're seeing those things being put into place. And digital ID, digital currencies, we see the European Union they're just waiting on the go-ahead from European Parliament, and they'll have it fully rolled out by 2030. That's their plan. They've already started pilot programs and everything for that. And I hear often from people, well, none of this will roll out before the rapture.
Okay.
And that may be the perspective of someone here in the United States who looks around and says we don't have digital currency. But if you're in China, they have the digital currencies and digital ID and social credit scores.
You're living in it.
So depending on where you live, it's already here.
And there's already Christians. There's many Christians in China.
Right.
In the underground. When again, going back to Singapore, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but thinking of it, you're surveilled everywhere. And I will say this also, because I enjoyed Singapore. It was the safest place I've ever imagined in my life. I asked somebody, I said, what happens if I steal that bag of potato chips from that store? You'll get arrested. Well, how do you know? I don't see any cops. They'll find you because everything's scanned. So crime is pretty close to 0% there.
Sure.
And so you can walk outside at 2 a.m, you're safe. You don't have to worry about anything happening to you. So there's this safety, there's this peace. Hey, this is easy. However, the flip side of it is it's a complete control system. If you have a good leader, that's great. But if you don't have a good leader, that's very bad. And we know it's going this direction. Another question I have for you, when we look at tokenization and everything going digital currency, with it could develop in such a way, especially with blockchain, that it doesn't have to necessarily be that every country surrenders their currency in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. So they can still keep their currency, but they're all under one umbrella.
Sure. Yeah, so we've seen the Bank of International Settlements has a project called Icebreaker that their goal is to create the operating system to be able to convert these currencies. So let's say you travel to Singapore and you need to exchange your dollars for the local currency, and it's digital on both sides. who makes that transaction, because they've talked about, well, we'll eliminate the intermediaries, we'll eliminate the banks from this process. It'll be so seamless, it'll be so efficient. Well, someone has to make that transaction. The Bank of International Settlements is positioning itself to be the one that makes that transaction. And they want all of these nations to basically build the same operating system or the same architecture for their digital currency, which would give the person at the top of that control over all of those currencies. So as you said, it doesn't mean that there's necessarily one world currency. You could have all the local currencies, but if they're all tied together through this digital system, you could have effective global control over all of the world's transactions, even though there's multiple currencies all over the world.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating as we see the speed that everything is developing. And again, it's a reminder that if we see these things come about, like you said with China, or we look at other nations where they're already in a system like that, we need to be careful here in the West, especially the United States. No, we could see these things. I've even thrown this out there, got people upset, but we could see things, we could see the 10 kings develop. We could even know who they are. It could come to that point before the rapture. We know the rapture is a signless event. It could happen at any moment, but at the same time, we could see a temple being built. Doesn't mean if the Antichrist is the one who gets going after the confirmation of the covenant is confirmed, that's different. I believe we'll be gone before the 7-year tribulation begins, but there's certain things that could take place. The Bible doesn't say Antichrist is going to build the temple. It's been speculated it'll be the main driving force that gets the nation of Israel on board to think, okay, this guy's the Messiah, but we don't know that. So there's lots of things that we could see develop before we are taken out, and I think we need to strengthen people too at the same time. And people get upset. Let me ask you this. Why do you think it is that people who study Bible prophecy get upset when we say, hey, we could be here for a few more years, or we could be here for 10 more years? Because if you understand it, it actually strengthens you. But some people will say, you're stealing my happiness by saying we might not get raptured this year. Or if we push back, we say, stop looking to Rosh Hashanah every time it rolls around saying we're going to get raptured this year. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I've heard that myself, that you're stealing my hope in regard to a false date was put out. And I said, no, there's no biblical reason to expect this date. And of course it went by and passed by. And I pointed out our hope should be in Jesus Christ. You know, and I think what's happening is people long to leave this world and be at home with Christ. And so the idea of enduring 10 more years before that happens, there's just an anticipation to hurry up and be with the Lord. That's completely understandable. But we need to make sure we stick to what the Scripture says, as you pointed out, and not substitute our speculations or our own thoughts about how it all might play out with specifically what does the Bible say, what does it not say, and what fits within that. Because again, Jesus told us we would have trials and sorrows here in this world, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And so we're not told we're going to miss out on any sort of discomfort. Clearly that's not true. Anybody that's lived any amount of time of life knows there's a lot of terrible things that will happen in your life and the lives of people around you. And so we're not guaranteed protection against the things that normally would happen in this world, just the 7-year tribulation itself. So I think that's probably where that comes from. But we just see this push toward it again, no matter who's in power. And you know, we saw when the Trump administration came in, you know, a lot of people thought, well, this delays things, right? Because he said no central bank digital currency, and he signed an executive order, we won't have a central bank digital currency. And then he turned around and passed the Genius Act. Well, what is the Genius Act? Well, it's pretty much a central bank digital currency. It's not centralized. Private entities can create these stable coins that are pretty much the same as a central bank digital currency, just controlled by those entities. But the government, the White House itself in its own press release said these must be programmable by the issuers to be seized, frozen, or destroyed by lawful government U.S. order. So meaning we're going to use you to surveil on our behalf in compliance with all of these laws that we've passed. And then if we determine that Tom Hughes has to have his currency destroyed or seized, then you must program it in order for that to happen. So it's essentially, it has the same functionality as the central bank digital currency. So again, it doesn't matter who's in power, we're marching toward this. And I think it's because of the spiritual forces that are behind all of this. It doesn't really matter who you put in power. Those spiritual forces have an agenda and they're pushing it forward.
And the good news is that we think of a great scripture to remind everybody too is in Revelation chapter 17, we know there's 10 kings who give their power and authority to the beast. We have the demonic forces behind all that. Yet, 3 verses later, the Bible says God put it into the heart of the 10 kings to give their power and authority to the beast in order to bring about his purposes. So even though these evil entities are using evil men, God is still the one on the throne because he's bringing about his plan, and Jesus is coming back. Britt, how can people connect with you?
Oh, the best place to find me is at brittgillette.substack.com.
Great, thank you so much. And listen, everybody, just a reminder, we are going to be in Santa Barbara, California coming up. In just a couple of weeks, you can register for that conference at hopeforourtimes.com. Join us, David Tao, James Cadiz, Brandon Holthouse, myself, Kathy Ireland. Some of you will remember Kathy Ireland, an amazing story she's going to be bringing. And also, we're doing a special at that conference on the KGB's Most Wanted. That's going to be one of the segments during the conference too. So that's going to be great. That's in Santa Barbara, California. Then we'll be in Rockwall, Texas. 2 weeks after that. Check them both out at hopeforourtimes.com. And make sure that you go to everything that Britt has. You will be blessed. God bless you, everybody.